Callistus. I'm really excited for this video, mainly because it is, we're starting to get into like the nitty-gritty of my universe, of my world. And now when I go more into stuff like this, the different stories will make a bit more sense, or you can come back to these videos and be like, okay, that's what he meant, or that's what he was talking about there. So these are going to be like the foundation videos for the channel, so I'm really excited to do these type of videos, you know. So without further ado, we would now say our Guildhouse mantra, the adventurer's rest, to boost the effects of today's ASMR. If you're new here, welcome. The mantra can be whispered by yourself or it can be enveloped by my words alone, but either way, it is still just as effective however you want to perceive it. The Guildhouse heart is safe and deep. I'm so sorry. The final story drifts to sleep. So sheath the sword you fought to keep, for now the quiet hours creep. Okay, now that you are rested, if you're in bed, you can close your eyes. If you're doing work, then you can just listen to my voice. So, before we get started with anything, we have to get started with the basics. You gotta get down to the basics. Every young adventurer understands the core concepts of magic, or in my world is called Vitalum or Serenum. But there's two different types. We're getting ahead of ourselves here. So, the core concept of Serenum comes from 10 different levels of inquiry. 10. For you to get to the next level, you must understand the core concepts of the previous level, and so on and so forth. So, well, it is interesting though, because a person's level of, or their mastery of Serenum depends on their personality and their character. For example, a ruthless person may never find the benefit of healing one of their allies, and they will stay a certain level before they can reach another level. Like if healing is level 3, then he'll never be able to progress. So we will go through the levels right now. So, level 1 is the core level. It is the basis of all magic, or all Serenum and Callistus, which is creativity. And level 1 is the essence of creating something out of nothing. It is also known as null object manipulation. Null object manipulation. So, you'll usually see a lot of sorcerers or a lot of spellcasters use this level 1 magic for simple tasks, such as creating a bridge over a ravine, or maybe shielding themselves for the rain, you know. It is essentially you creating something in the air using your Serenum. And like I said before, if you're new here, Serenum is a potent magic energy, or potent form of energy that flows through all things. You can sort of think of it like chi from your world. It is sort of like chi. It is running through everything, and thus everything is connected. However, there are a few nuances to this, but we'll get there. So, as I previously said, level 1 is creating something out of nothing. Now, once you have a understanding of creating something out of nothing, different uses, but mainly they're being used to evaporate the serenum out of a object or out of the flow. Like for instance, serenum can flow through water. It flows through water, it flows through the air, it flows through fire, even through the earth. And thus, you can evaporate or consume that serenum and use that earth for a limited amount of time. Now, this only works if it's an inanimate object. You can only evaporate serenum from an inanimate object, but of course, there's also some interesting use cases for this as well. So that's not always it's not always going to be, there are some new ones. It gets very interesting, I should say. But we're gonna stick. I'm really excited. I'm sorry, but we're gonna stick to level 2 here, and that's basically is a basic elemental magic. It's evaporating the serenum from an object and using it to your benefit. Now, this could be used for on the defensive or offensive, but it is most intensely used in combat situations. And this is level 2 is where most sorcerers stop, mainly because at this stage in time, if you have a core understanding of level 2 basic elemental magics, you can pretty much get out of any combat situation as long as you keep your distance as a sorcerer. However, there's more. There's a whole lot more. So, and of course, like I said, yes, you really don't need anything more than this. So, for instance, in the Phonian Empire, if you want to join their Serenum or Acromonas or Solifera, what you'll come to understand also, has been banned. However, if you want to join one of their guild cores, which basically guild hunters, they hunt adventurers because adventuring is banned in the Phonian Empire, which I'm gonna go on in another video. Level 2 is like the requirement. It's the expectation that you have basic elemental knowledge. You also need level 2 to travel into the Wulong Coalition territory. But of course, we'll get into all that later, much later. So, level 3. Level 3 is bizarre or unusual magics, which is advanced techniques, teleportation, space manipulation. There is a very talented individual that created this bizarre magic. That's why it doesn't have a specific name except for unusual magic. A person named Saori. She was first witnessed using teleportation magic with a special sword, a mythical weapon, which we'll also get into later. There are also mythical weapons that can increase the serenum that is flowing through your body. And Saori was the first to use this weapon. She also has a story that I will tell very soon because she is a very important part of Callistus's history and how serenum came to be. But yes, bizarre unusual magic is teleportation, space manipulation, anything that is a bit odd or weird. For instance, even though in level 1 you can create something out of nothing with null object manipulation, there are also ways that you can create nothing out of something. You can do the reverse effect, such as using serenum to pull out the essence from, we could say, water, and using that water to form another liquid. That would be considered bizarro or bizarre magic or unusual magic. That's considered level 3. Level 3, however, is it can't be contained. essentially manipulating that serenum and focusing your energy toward your, basically, you could think of level 1 and 2 as breathing the serenum in and letting it exhale out of your body. It's a flow. It's a constant flow of energy. However, with level 3, you are consuming that serenum and letting it manifest into your body, and thus it can become unstable. So with great power comes some concerning instances where your mind could crumble, your physical form could deplete itself, and eventually you could even die if you aren't careful. However, there is a caveat, to learning this magic. Once you've completed, at least, it's hard to say, but once you've understood the level of bizarre, unusual magic, once you've reached, maybe you had a instance where you used level 2 or level 1 magic to its pinnacle, and you decided that you don't want to go any further. Once you reach a set of, how can I explain this? Once you reach a set of peace with the fact that you know that you don't need to go further with level 3, then you get to level 4, which is healing magics. Now, healing magics is pretty simple and straightforward. Unlike bizarre magic, which cannot be contained, once you understand the peak of serenum, what level 3 is essentially, when you get to level 3, you basically have an understanding of serenum to its core. And that's why level 3 is like, if you do anything more than what is needed of that serenum, you're going overboard. And that's what causes, your mind to crumble. But once you reach that peak and once you understand, then you can start doing amazing feats such as healing magic, which is level 4. You can heal limbs, you can regenerate limbs, you can heal wounds, extract different substances or poisons from the body. A lot of things you're able to do with level 4 healing magic, but of course, a lot of people don't get to that stage. As I said before, level 2 magic is where most people stop because they're afraid of the consequences of level 3 magic, especially after the Fourth Holy War, which we're gonna do soon, which is a whole nother video. It was, but to put it into perspective, or to just give you a glimpse, the Fourth Holy War was when a lot of people decided to drive themselves into madness with level 3 magics to get ahead of the curve when magic was just starting to manifest itself. So, we've talked about 4 now. Level 1, creating something out of nothing, or null object manipulation. Level 2 is basic elemental magics, manipulating the serenum through wind, fire, earth, air, water. Level 3 is bizarre or unusual magics such as teleportation and space manipulation. And of course there's other things that you could do, but of course it depends on the user and how far they're willing for their mind or physical body to crumble. And then there's level 4, which is healing magics. Once you've stopped at level 3 and you finally understood the power of serenum and its influence over your body, then you can finally manifest that serenum and use it to cure, which is the basis of healing magics. Now, of course, I'm not a sorcerer myself. I mainly deal with daggers. I don't really use serenum. I use serenum a different way, which we will get into also, but basics. So the basic magics, level 1 to level 4, is all that Callistus knows of right now. That's all that they know of. That's mostly what isolated parts of the world, such as in Escovia or Ksenia, there have been rare use cases where people have created other different types of magics or other different types of Serenum uses. So, in Escovia, there is a rumor that someone has developed an advanced elemental magic. Advanced. We saw a bit of this during the First Holy War, where there were a few mages that were able to cast explosions, sunbursts, and grand fires throughout the sky. Pretty much anything where you can combine one or two of the elemental magics. Essentially, this is unheard of because, as I said before, level 2 magic is letting the Serenum flow through you. It flows in and it flows out. However, people that can use advanced elemental magics are somehow able to perform feats where they let the elemental magics flow in, but they also use some of the core concepts of level 3 where they manipulate it and they congest it, and they also allow a second magical property to envelop themselves and then to disperse it again. That is unheard of, and it is very interesting, and that is also why the Third Holy War started again. Well, that was one of the reasons, not the main reason, but it is the reason. It was one of the reasons why, mainly due to the fact that it is a lot of power. It is a lot of power. Imagine a sprinkle of small little explosions that then cast small little rocks that are flying at 50, 60 miles per hour and hitting the ground like a shockwave of pellets. That's a lot of power, and everyone wanted it. And unfortunately, a lot of people died with that knowledge, and thus, advanced elemental magic never made it far out of Escovia. But unfortunately, we will see in a few more stories that people still want a bit of that power. So next is what we call forbidden Serenum techniques. These forms of Serenum are strictly prohibited by the Wulong Coalition, while at the time of the Second Holy War were the peoples that were in charge of creating laws or Serenum property laws, and if you broke one, you were banned from practicing Serenum techniques or magic. And one of them were the use of pact scrolls. As of right now, there are 5 pact scrolls in existence. There's Yokomono's Domain, Zarzalon's Curse, Akukaki's Mortality, and Haruyo's Greed. The 5th, or I'm sorry, wait, no, there's, well, technically, there is the 4th and 5th aren't known as of right now. However, the first, well, oh my god, I can't count. It's actually 4, I'm so sorry. The 5th is unknown because it was buried deep under Escovia. However, for the first 4, they're banned. Pact scrolls essentially give a person that is unable to use Serenum or unable to harness the power of level 1 magics or level 2, level 3. So as I said before, for you to utilize level 2, you have to learn the core concepts of level 1. Level 3, you have to learn the concepts 2, 1, and 4, and first, 4 and foremost. However, However, the back scrolls allow you to essentially skip those steps, and thus they were banned by the Wulong Coalition. However, there are rare use cases where individuals could envelop that power into a back scroll, which are called magical scrolls, but for now we're staying on back scrolls. As I said before, there are 5 in existence, with 4 that have been confirmed. Yokomono's domain is the first of these, and the first to ever come into existence. Back scrolls are deals made with a very sinister entity known as Enganians. Enganians are beasts or individuals that were birthed in Ingesham. It's really hard to explain where they're from, because it's sort of like looking through the lens on top of your world. Ingesham is, for the most part, a parallel world of ours, and thus it could be seen as hell, but not really, because creatures of high enough serenum can travel in and out of this world, but those of the mortal world cannot travel in, and if they do, then they cannot leave. But those that are in Ingesham can leave and go back as they wish. But Yokomono is a very sinister deity. She's essentially an Ingesham goddess. She was one of the birth mothers of the realm. Upon a person utilizing the back scroll or Yokomono's domain, they will envelop the advanced elemental magic. They used frost or ice, but it is a bit more than that, because Yokomono's domain allows you to travel within a special realm in Ingesham. In fact, if you watched the short story with Yokomono and Guafi, you sort of understand. Well, it gives you a bit of a glimpse of Ingesham and how it can manifest. But essentially, and I hope it's not a spoiler, if I'll try it. Is it a spoiler? No, because I do plan to do a part 2 of that. But essentially, Yokomono's domain allows you to travel in and out of a special bubble that is only relatively located inside of Ingesham. But it also allows that person to stop time for a while they're in that realm, and if they touch anything or interact with anything, for that object to frost over. That is Yokomono's domain, Yokomono's power. She allows that person to envelop anything in ice and travel to a special realm. However, if you decide to broker a deal with this sinister entity, you lose all of your humanity, all of your emotion. You essentially become a cold individual, and you become as cold as ice, you could say. Zarsalon's curse. Zarsalon's curse, as of right now, isn't understood. However, it is said that a person that uses this pact scroll is able to harness an explosive power. Now, how explosive this is, I do not know. However, unfortunately, if you utilize this curse, this pact scroll, you do lose the ability to remember your name and remember the name of anyone that you meet. If you learn the name of someone, you instantly forget them and what they look like. They become blind to you. And thus, when you forget your name, you also forget what you look like. It is one of the most horrid back scrolls as you completely envelop yourself in a world of torment. Akukaki's mortality. There's not much known of Akukaki and who he is in Engisham, nor of Zarzalan. Both Akukaki, he was known for his ruthless attempts of and ruthless campaigns into the mortal realm of Callistus in search of immortality and immortal objects. Most notably, he wanted Immotus, the weapon of immortality, owned by Angela Spitzel, which gives the wielder immortality and the ability to create a clone of themselves. And you essentially switch out with your clone, with your dark clone. And this dark clone was essentially pure Serenum. And when you switch with them, you gain all the attributes of your past self. So you can't think of it as, it gets really weird, right? And that's why all of these back scrolls are sort of level 3 unusual magics that have been manifested into a physical property or physical object. It'll be really confusing to be able to explain it, but of course there will be stories that talk all about this soon enough. But Akukaki's mortality, like I said, he went into I failed to completely remember, but he went into a long war with Angela for her weapon of immortality, or Immotus, that led to his insanity, and thus he trapped himself into a back scroll at the cost of giving someone else mortality. However, if you consume Akukaki, you consume his rage. And unfortunately, anyone that consumes this back scroll will also be endeared to want to go to war with the Immotus user. And the Immotus, the weapon of mortality, is passed down. It's a mythical weapon, which we're also going to do later. I'm sort of getting into it now, but Immotus is passed down. So anyone that owns Immotus, and if anyone owns Immotus at that point in time, which they will, and if anyone consumes the back scroll, Akukaki's mortality, they will instantly want to fight each other. And then there's Haru's Greed. Haru's Greed allows you to use any of the previous levels of magic. However, you will eventually want more. You'll eventually want more pain, more suffering, but increasingly you'd want more magical properties, and thus you will go to multiple or an extinguished amount of lengths to get more power. You're essentially on a search of power with Haru's Greed. That's a trade-off. You'll be able to use Serenum to an extent, almost to a godlike level. However, it will eventually consume you, and you'll forget who you were. Now, like I said, there is no word on the 5th back scroll. However, there may be a time where I talk about it, but So that is level 6. Level 7, as I said before, are magical scrolls. So these allow the use of advanced elemental magics. But the caveat is that they have their incantation that can be used a limited amount of times. However, they're instantly conjured. So anyone that isn't at first with level 5 or level 3 or even level 2 can use these magical scrolls. The reason they're above back scrolls is mainly because they were banned, but with back scrolls they were more rare. this Wulong coalition believed that anyone that did this were a traitor to the Serenum arts or the Serenum techniques or magic, sorcery, what have you. And anyone that was found using or creating magical scrolls were sentenced to death or sentenced to a life in the Ingisham Verenum, which is basically just Ingisham Verenum, but we'll talk about Verenum soon enough. So, level 8 and level 9 consist of Astral. Now, Astral, as of this point in time, isn't really well known because there's only one user of Astral, and that is the Wulong Coalition, Empress Kriok. She used it during the Second Holy War, and is the reason why multiple continents on the Callistus collapsed into themselves into the sea. And it is even referenced or perhaps it's even referenced that she created an entirely new realm when she used this type of magic. But of course, this is all speculation, because the only individuals that saw her use this astral were some of her followers at the time. But she is somewhat immortal, or she has a very long lifespan. So unfortunately, no one can back up her words, but who knows, maybe that is a story for me to tell. Okay, and now finally we're at level 10. Level 10, and like I said, level 8 and 9 are astral, but not much to say about that. Level 10 is solely magic. Solely magic is the root of Serenum. Now, there's a lot of speculation as to how Serenum came to be. Some people believed, some monks or deities say that it was first formed in Escovia, others Kashania. But realistically, no one knows where it first manifested. But there's a following on a world-renowned religion called Solius, and they believe that Soli magic was sort of how you humans of your world believe in the Big Bang, right? They believe that Soli magic was like the Big Bang, but for Serenum, and that's how Serenum spread throughout the entire realm. So, level 10, Soli magic, when that Big Bang instance was created, not only did it spread Serenum throughout the entire realm, but also it created 14 mythical weapons. 14 mythical weapons. These mythical weapons are very unique in their use cases, but also their users, because they always change based on the person that picks them up. My personal favorite, and I won't get into all these because I think it's better if I make an entire video based on these mythical weapons, so I would do that. However, to give an idea of these mythical weapons, my favorite is Elegant Occultist. It is the weapon of flamboyance, and all the weapons have different names, such as there's the Elegant Occultist, which is the weapon of flamboyance. There's a weapon of credulity, the weapon of greed, the weapon of time and space, weapon of corporeal. All of them have a specific instance. However, at this point in time, the owner is Queen Liza, also a character that will be in a short story. But it is a large whip-like blade that's able to reach several feet, and its power lies in a person's vision of themselves, or they see themselves, the higher their self-esteem, or the bigger their ego, and the more power that the weapon gives to the user. And the whip blade is able to use 3 modes. The first one is authority. It gives the user a huge boost in speed of power, and is only activated if the person strikes first or before the fight, or intimidates their opponent in battle, which we'll see Green Laser do soon enough. And then once you gain authority in the battle, then it's time to produce us into Grandiose, which Grandiose is the 3rd mode. And after successfully dodging 3 moves consecutively, your opponent is thrown back by interceptable force, showing just how grand you are. It's essentially showing your grandeur. Now, after successfully using both authority and Grandiose, you're able to start a Monarch game. So, in the Monarch game, your entire world creates a golden realm that is enveloped or surrounded with 3 to 5 large pillars, and these pillars give the Weapon of Flamboyance user an immense amount of power. However, if the opponent that was sent to the room destroys all of these pillars, the Grandiose user or the Monarch game user will instantly die. However, in that room, the Weapon of Flamboyance user can be seen almost as a god, as a deity. They have almost infinite amount of power in that room, and thus there hasn't been a single person that has ever beat the Elegant Egotist user. Not to mention that if you die in this room, you become one of the pillars yourself. You become trapped inside. So, if a person just continuously destroys opponents in battle or destroys their mentality, they'll be trapped inside and gain more and more power. So essentially, as long as they don't die or meet someone that is of greater influence or greater, that's like a higher ego than them, they'll essentially always be the victor in a battle. And that's why Elegant Egotist is my favorite weapon. Because based on a person's vision of themselves, which I think is a very interesting aspect. But like I said before, the 14 mythical weapons all have different use cases and all have different ways of allowing their user to gain power or to gain upper hand in battle, as they were made by solely. Well, the followers believe that it was made by solely for war and only for war. So, now that we have gone through the 10 different levels of magic, it is time for us to save the rest for part 2. I know. But the video has gone on longer than I thought it would. I don't want to create another hour video. So, if you want a part 2 where I talk about the magic systems, or pretty much they are magic systems, soulbound weapons, and advanced systems, which consist of Vitellum, Solasfera, Acrimonis, you can leave a comment and like the video, and don't forget to subscribe, as I will be making that video very, very, very soon. But for now, Daggerino, I hope that you have a very good rest, or very good sleep, and I will see you in the next one. Have a safe trip and sweet dreams. Goodbye.